to another episode of Flix List here on WHYR LP 96.9 FM, Baton Rouge Community Radio. If you can't tell by the opening theme, today we're all about Bond, James Bond. I'm DJ Clay.
I'm Chewy.
And I'm RCL.
With us today, we've got a special guest. It's our good friend Steven. He is our resident expert. He has vast film knowledge which far surpasses that of my own.
Well, let's not let it get out of hand.
Yeah. Mostly about James Bond.
So, your obsession with Bond started fairly early.
I would say in my high school years.
I remember I knew you in high school, and we were really impressed one day at lunch because you were able to name all the Bond films in order.
Yeah, that's how much time I have on my hands.
If you're going to acquire knowledge, I think you acquired a good knowledge, you know.
Yeah.
So let's talk, because we've all gotten together and watched the first 3 James Bond movies over the last couple of days, and we have had a blast.
Oh,
Absolutely. It has just been misogyny all over the place.
I do feel a little guilty laughing every time I see Bond smack a girl on the behind. It makes me feel as though I'm condoning the behavior, but honestly, it's a really fun world to be a part of, even if you don't necessarily agree with the behavior.
Is there something wrong with slapping a girl on the behind? Is that something I should not do?
RCL, man. You have so much to either learn or teach me.
So let's talk about it, though. What attracted you to these movies so strongly that you now own them all?
Well, I just think they're so fun. You know, they're not a movie you want to sit down and watch to have a serious emotional experience. You know, this is an escape. When I watch these movies, I imagine myself as James Bond.
I like that a lot. It's a fantasy.
Absolutely.
Because I don't think there's one of us who doesn't imagine themselves as Bond.
Right. You want to go fight the villains. You want to get all the girl. Every guy has this fantasy.
No, absolutely. Well, we reviewed a documentary on Hugh Hefner not too long ago on the show, and I think I made several references to Hefner being Bond without a job. Yeah, and so you're sort of, it's an amazing combination of male fantasy in that not only are you strong and can fight and you're smart and you can outwit, but you're also surrounded by beautiful women basically all the time
And get to play with really awesome toys.
Toys.
Oh, yeah.
The
The
toys.
gadgets.
Well, let's talk about the gadgets. Give us an introduction on the character and the actor that plays him in all these early Bond movies.
Q, you're speaking of.
Yes.
Well, in the first film, I don't remember the actor's name. He only appears for a few minutes, but actor Desmond Llewellyn, the guy we're all familiar with as Q, shows up first time in From Russia with Love.
The second Bond.
The second Bond movie.
And of course, as the listeners probably know, this is the Sean Connery era, the first Bond.
First and best.
Well, which was the first Bond movie?
Well, the first Bond movie is Dr. No, which most people, if you ask them, somebody down the street, they'll say Goldfinger, which is not true. Goldfinger is number 3. It's Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger to start the series.
Which is what the 3 that we watched.
Yes.
And let's start with number 1. Give us some vital stats on our first Bond movie.
It was made for $1 million, which in 1962 was actually considered low budget for that time. It's pretty low key. The action scenes are not very big and explosive. I think you get one explosion at the end. Is all you get.
We noticed that quite a bit in that I think I pointed out the first car chase ever in a Bond film and went, guys, it looks like this is just two cars driving fast, you know.
Not even fast.
Yeah, no,
just kind of like
it's amazing. It's almost like the idea of a car chase was enough to make it a part of the action genre, you know.
I think that's the difference. There is a very intense car chase in Goldfinger, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Right. And the difference between the 2 car chases, Dr. No and Goldfinger, is that in Dr. No, it's very mild, but suspenseful. Or at least I can imagine the original audience felt that it was suspenseful. And it's almost just the mere fact that our hero is being followed creates the intense suspense.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas with Goldfinger, it's the actual action of the chase.
Guns are being fired, things are exploding, smoke is coming out of cars. It's mass hysteria.
So, who directed Dr. No? And let's talk about his lovely co-star, because you can't talk about Bond without talking about the Bond women.
Absolutely not. Well, it's British director Terence Young. He directed 3 Bond films: Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and the 4th one, Thunderball. He is credited mainly with giving Bond his classy style. He kind of saw himself as like this.
He was the shaken, not stirred
Absolutely.
element of Bond.
He brings that to Bond, you know, his nice suit, the way he orders drinks, those kind of mannerisms. Terence Young really brings that to the table.
Yeah.
Who was his co-star in the first one?
We're talking about the beautiful Ursula Andress.
So hot.
Wow.
Dream girl.
Dream within a dream.
Yes.
And you brought up an interesting piece of trivia when we were watching it about her voice in that movie.
She is actually dubbed. That is not her voice.
Apparently, her accent was too strong.
Too Swedish. Or
Yes.
Swiss,
Yeah.
whatever she was.
Yes.
Hello, Bond. I would like to kiss you. That's like
Mario.
Italian.
Worst Swede ever.
You're welcome, everyone.
So you also talked about this movie being sort of the Bond prototype. They hadn't perfected it yet.
No, there's certain things that were not brought to the Bond series yet. There are no real gadgets in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's no teaser before the main titles. It's not quite formed. It's kind of like a rough edge Bond. They're kind of
A
experimenting.
Bond sketch.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like if Bond were a TV show, this is the pilot pitching the concept, seeing if it's going to be well received by audiences to proceed further.
Right, exactly.
All right, who is our villain in? I want to kind of round out our first Bond movie, but our villain in this one.
Dr. No.
Of course.
Well, yes.
Who is a member of the criminal organization Spectre.
Correct.
Which I was amazed rewatching these movies. I had not seen them since I was a young adolescent, and I always thought he was fighting the Germans or the Russians, or really very rarely he is fighting this mythical crime syndicate known as Spectre.
Right, and I think that's what's so unique about Bond, because you got to remember at this time the Cold War was going on, and so they didn't want to start too much tension over these movies.
Right,
So
this could have been a real political problem.
exactly. Whereas in the books, mainly the Smersh organization, which is the Russian equivalent to Spectre, is used more so in the book, whereas in the movies they go straight to Spectre.
Which Bond movies were adaptations of Bond books?
This is correct. Yes, they were.
And the writer was...
Ian Fleming. Yes, yeah. I'm surprised we haven't mentioned his name
Yeah,
so
we-
far.
we
He's
we
the
need
creator.
to, yeah.
Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about Ian Fleming?
Well, Ian Fleming was actually a British agent during World War II. He knew a guy who was kind of like James Bond, and he kind of incorporated some of his adventures, so-called real-life adventures.
into this book series.
Exactly, yes. And
The spy novel to end all spy novels, I think.
exactly.
Oh, yeah.
I think the guy's name was Dushkov Pavlov. Which says it doesn't quite
yes,
roll off the tongue.
My name is Dushka. Dushka Pavlov.
I'm very happy they changed the name.
It's a good thing. Good thing.
But, and you know a little bit about the kind of original True Bond that they based this guy off.
Right,
of.
I did. I watched since in preparation of this, I watched I guess documentary called True Bond, which is available on Netflix Instant. It sort of talks about Dushkov, the real basis for James Bond. Ian Fleming knew this guy, worked with him in the not Secret Service, but I guess it was in MI6.
MI6.
They worked together to... I don't want to say they were single-handedly responsible, but they very much helped in winning D-Day. This guy gave misinformation to the Germans.
Was a real-life double agent.
Right. The Germans approached him, asked him to be a spy. He was like, oh, okay. And then he went immediately to Britain, told them that, and became a spy for Britain, but still accepted being a spy for Germany.
Playing,
And,
but
faking.
What
as
amazes me about this guy is the one aspect of the James Bond movies that I assumed absolutely were Hollywood made up stories is his sexual nature with all these beautiful women. But apparently this guy
No, that's absolutely
was
that was the thing, is that like that's the truest part of it all. He there's an interview with him where he says, as a spy you play your part. So if you're assigned being a dishwasher, you play being a dishwasher. It's unfortunate, but you're a dishwasher. His undercoverness was being a playboy out in the open.
Right.
That was his. This is the real life true thing. And we were laughing about it after we had seen all these Bond movies. Like, there's no way he wouldn't last 5 minutes because everybody would know that that's Bond. Da, da, da. Yeah. But no, this guy lived out in the open. He dated Simone Simon, who was a famous actress at the time. If anybody is old film buff, she was the star in The Cat People. She very openly dated very beautiful women and went to casinos and gambled.
It's incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
So what you're saying is old Dushkov really drew the short straw in the stack. Huh?
Oh yeah, it was terrible for him.
Oh, awful, poor guy. Stephen, you actually have, not only are you sort of a film historian, a film buff, but you very specifically have an interest in film soundtracks.
I do.
Which is a really unique. We're not talking about, the popular songs that are in movies, but
No.
the score.
The actual score.
Let's talk a little bit about the Bond score from our first Bond movie into the next several.
Okay, in the first film, Dr. No, the score is written by a guy named Monty Norman, and he is the one credited with writing the familiar, James Bond theme.
The one we heard at the top of the show.
That's the one everybody knows. But he didn't actually orchestrate it. A guy named John Barry was brought in to actually orchestrate the theme. There was this kind of controversy of who owned the rights to the thing, who really created it. I guess by the second film, they would rather have John Barry. He gives us the Bond sound. He really does.
And he did how many of the soundtracks after that?
You had to ask me that one.
About how many? I mean, I know it's hard to keep track of because there's so many.
It's about, if I had to guess, about 8.
I just looked it up. It was 11.
11.
Okay.
Wow,
Yes,
okay.
11. There you go.
Wow.
Yes.
No, but that's great. I mean, that's incredible. That's the bulk of the Bond films.
Sure. And, he incorporates the song, like the song that precedes each film. He incorporates that into each film's score and make it unique, like Goldfinger, da da da, Goldfinger, you hear that throughout the whole soundtrack.
Goldfinger.
Thank you very much.
Well, but he's creating a film language that continues to get used. I mean, I'll mention the Indiana Jones soundtrack as well as even Star Wars, in that there's character-based melodies that whenever a character is at his strongest, his melody starts playing. And he utilizes that idea superbly in these movies.
The music definitely complements what is happening at the moment. It complements the movie, and it kind of sets the audience up to have the proper emotional response to what's going on.
I mean, every time you hear "ba-na, ba-na," you're like, oh, he's about to do something cool, and you get excited, you get on the edge of your seat. It prepares you for the awesomeness that's about to ensue.
I mean, it's a perfect representative of who Bond is. It's a very jazzy, classy sounding kind of thing, which is how Bond is. He's a classy guy. It's just such a fun theme.
Well, there was something that Clay had mentioned while we were watching it, is that the Bond theme, specifically in the first film, had almost this surf rock feel to it.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of Dick Dale. It's bizarrely...
It's definitely a Miserlou-esque
bizarre
form of music.
guitar, a good sort of jazz guitar,
very staccato.
surf rock. Yeah,
Sure.
I wish I knew more about how to describe it, but I never noticed that before.
Well, it reflects the setting of each film.
Well, that's a really interesting point. So, before we wind up moving on to these other two movies, is there any take-home point regarding Dr. No that you could give us?
Well, I think Dr. No is important in that this is the film that introduces us to this character. Whereas in later films, it's all about, what kind of situations is he put in. This is James Bond's introduction.
This is the character study in Bond, is what you're saying.
It tells us, okay, this is who this guy is.
And he sets us up very well for the next movie.
From Russia with Love.
Funny how we were just talking about earlier how the themes match the location, and that had a very Russian feel as opposed to the first theme having that island feel.
It's punching into your ears.
The music in From Russia with Love is a little more formed as compared to that in Dr. No, whereas John Barry has now taken over scoring duties. Okay. This is his first full score in the film.
And really, you can say that about the movie. The movie is now more fully formed. We have a more fully formed Bond. We are starting to develop the habits that last throughout the entire Bond movie. This is the first time we get a hold of Q.
Yes, that's correct.
This is, we're starting to develop things that become cliches later.
Right. Number one being the villain organization, Spectre. We finally get to see them. Whereas in the first film, you don't even see the villain until about 30 minutes left in the movie. Here, you get the villains right off. You know, it starts in the teaser.
In the teaser before the opening credits, which is also the first time you see that, is in From Russia with Love.
Correct.
Yeah, so now we're introduced to the quintessential shadowed man turned in his chair, petting his white cat, and we don't know his identity.
Right. For those who have seen the Austin Powers movies, but not the James Bond movies, From Russia with Love is going to seem awfully familiar to you.
Yeah, if you're a fan of Inspector Gadget, you might know this villain somewhere else.
Yes.
No, but that's how quintessentially Bond it is that we almost know these things better from the things that have been kind of lovingly mimicking Bond.
Correct.
So give us some of the details about From Russia with Love, the director.
The director is Terrence Young. He returns for the second time in the Bond series. This is 1 year later in 1963, and it's twice the budget of Dr. No.
Wow, so we've basically seen that this
Can be a successful...
Yes, the series is catching on. You know, it hasn't reached, the phenomenon stage yet. But
Well, and also at the box office, Dr. No did 59 million, whereas From Russia with Love did 79 million, which equates to about 560 million nowadays.
So these movies are doing quite well.
Yeah, they're doing all right.
Quite
extremely
well.
popular.
All right, and then who was our lovely lady in From Russia with Love? Because she's one of my favorites.
I may mispronounce her name. I think it's Danielle Bianca, I believe. I may be doing her disservice.
No, I think you're right. She is probably the softest Bond girl we get in these early movies.
Yeah, she's more. I don't want to say average. She's very beautiful, but she's not.
Nothing average looking about her.
No, nothing at all.
But she's a normal person who's sort of brought into this craziness by outside forces.
She doesn't have that outstanding personality that differentiates her as a dynamic character.
Well, and also something I noticed about her in comparison to later Bond films and even Dr. No is that generally the women have this feeling of this strength about them. They are a match of wits and cunning with Bond.
They are a match with Bond.
But this one, not so much. She seems very easily swayed, very easily turned, and very easily overtaken.
The interesting thing about the Bond villains, because we talked a little bit about the villains, but there's another element that you were talking to me about earlier today, which is there's also the henchman. Correct. And the henchman is actually quite a famous actor that you might recognize from Jaws.
This is correct. It's our very own Robert Shaw.
So Robert Shaw is playing our henchman, and he is an awesome henchman. But we talk about a sort of odd thing in that era, which is he's sort of just a really good actor that is kind of bulky.
Yeah, it was one of those things that I find funny about old school movies, old school tough guys, where basically they just sucked in their stomachs and puffed out their chest, and they were now these big, huge, hulking masses. Whereas now, if you're going to have some big, huge, hulking mass, he has to have an 8-pack and
steroids.
He's got to be on steroids. He's got to have veins everywhere poking out.
So nowadays, where you would have hired, a professional wrestler for the role, they hired a really great actor.
That's right.
And just kind of told you he was bulky.
Yeah, the only way you know he's tough is by them saying, he seems tough.
Right.
She hits him in the stomach with
all of her might.
All of her might.
Doesn't budge.
Yeah.
He seems fit enough. That's the
that's
the dialogue. Yes. So we got a couple of really great villains in this one that become super iconic and fodder for Austin Powers. We have a great henchman, we have a fun girl, and Bond himself kind of comes to his full fruition. I mean, he's kind of the Bond now that we know and love.
Yeah, and this is the first time he gets a gadget.
Oh,
mind you, too.
He gets toys
Yes,
and
he
a
does.
car.
Yes.
All of these things that become icons of the Bond theme.
Well, one of the biggest changes from the first movie to the second is the amount of action and the way the action scenes play out. The fight scene between Bond and Grant on the train is, in my opinion, one of the most incredible fight scenes ever, and terribly influential.
Especially in all the Bond movies. And it was something we all took note of. As soon as they basically knock themselves into a light, the light breaks, the lighting changes, and we all went, whoa.
Yeah,
it was a moment
that was
we
awesome.
all had where we all looked at each other and went, oh my God, this is cool.
Yes. And it's such an intense scene, too. The way the editing in that scene is brilliant. Absolutely.
Wonderful editing and wonderful lighting. And as well as, it's bizarre because it takes place in this tiny little train car. And the amount of intensity that they're able to produce with these two guys. You know, in modern Bond films, he does fights on cranes that are hundreds of feet in the sky and like building tops, and they're just in this tiny little train car, and the amount of tension and violence and ferociousness that they're able to achieve is incredible.
It's grittier than most things you'll see in later Bond movies. You know,
Right.
later it's more fantastical, whereas here it's
How far can we push this? Whereas,
in this little space.
right, exactly.
Goldfinger, he's the man with the Midas touch, a spider's touch.
And our third Bond movie, the fantastic Goldfinger,
A cold
which I
finger.
guess we're gonna say is probably the most famous of all of the Bond
I would
films.
say so. Yes, everybody knows Goldfinger.
How did it do at the box office, Mr. Money? We were talking about this earlier. The budget went up quite a bit.
the budget went up $1 million.
Okay,
so
so-
it was, in the first movie it was $1 million, then $2 million. Now we're at $3 million.
Okay, so a $3 million budget brought in.
$125 million.
So it made a profit of $122 million.
No, absolutely. That
absolutely
that equates to $850-something million.
Modern dollars.
Modern
Ridiculous
dollars.
amount.
So this movie made for a measly $3 million budget. It is starting to approach Avatar status profits. You know, if you convert it to modern money. So this is, Stephen, where Bond he's off like a Roman candle.
This is where Bond becomes a phenomenon.
There's now toys and video games. And, I mean, this is where it goes now.
It's the 60s equivalent of Star Wars. Let's just say that.
The craft of a Bond movie, of creating a Bond movie, it has been perfected at this point, and they are showing you the full display.
Well, let's talk about who directs this one. Is it still Terrence Young?
No, this is actually a new director. His name's Guy Hamilton.
He did great, though. I mean, it's the intensity and the action is reeling out of control in this one. I mean,
Sure.
It's the adventure-wise the best one we've seen so far.
There's not a boring moment in Goldfinger. Never do you find yourself just like, okay, let's get to the next scene. No, you're wrapped up in this movie. It's fun through the whole film.
Who is our Bond girl in this one?
Well, we actually have a few of them, but the main one being Pussy Galore.
Oh,
It's incredible what they could get
Get
away with.
Yeah, I don't
It's
think
incredible because the first two Bond movies they insinuate a lot of sexuality, whereas this one they've started naming their Bond girls things.
I mean,
overt references.
very overt. Yeah, they're not even trying to hide it at this point.
I think the interesting thing is that this is the original Chasing Amy, in that a man comes along and turns a woman.
Our Bond girl in this one, which is something Stephen pointed out that I didn't notice as a kid, doesn't seem interested in men.
No, she's
Terrible.
not.
So sometimes the Bond girls aren't interested in Bond, and they play a little hard to get. And, you know, of course, there's that very misogynistic, like, I will kiss you until you love me, that he does. But in this one, he's almost turning a woman.
He is.
Which
He's
is...
turning her over to his...
and it's bizarre in the 60s. It's
I
really
can't say I've
bizarre.
ever seen it in any other film, honestly.
Well, that's why I mentioned Chasing Amy, which is one of my favorite films.
right, right.
That's, I mean, he successfully turns her for about a few months, and then she goes back and realizes that men are a mistake.
Which is
Very wisely.
obvious, right? You know, and she's a fun character because we'll call her Mrs. Galore, Miss Galore. But she's a fun character because she is tough. You know, she has Bond in quite a number of vulnerable positions. At gunpoint, I'm sorry, I see what I've said now. But at gunpoint and drugged, and she is a powerful pilot. She is a powerful woman,
And she's a more mature Bond girl as well. This is the first one who is a more mature woman who has a proper head on her shoulders and is a force to be reckoned with.
I like how you say mature and not older.
because she was a little.
She's closer to Sean Connery's actual age, whereas the others were a bit younger.
Yeah, like 20.
Right.
Well, what do we miss? Let's talk a little bit more about the villains. In this
Okay.
one.
Well, in this one,
It's actually odd because
You're
it's not Spectre anymore.
This is the only Sean Connery Bond film where you don't deal with Spectre. The real villains are actually Red China, but they kind of use them in the backdrop. Whereas Goldfinger,
himself.
Yeah, he's our focus in this film.
Now, and he's not a part of any large criminal organization. He is just a criminal mastermind.
Himself, yes.
Himself, and he has utilized Red China as well as some very almost offensively stereotypical American gangsters.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, see? I don't understand what's going on, and I'm a little intimidated.
This is making me
see?
uncomfortable. See? Yeah.
Yeah, we don't like it when they make fun of white Americans.
Yeah. The British were kind of poking fun at little, which
they were.
is fun. You know, it's all in good fun.
Right.
And let's not fail to mention the henchman. The
henchman
one of
in
the
this
most
one.
A
famous
fantastic henchman.
Yeah, odd job.
Who throws a hat?
Who throws a hat?
Exactly.
And really,
Hats off to him, honestly, what he's able to accomplish. But seriously, Steven came up with a very good point. The first time I saw this movie, I scoffed at the idea of Odd Job because he throws the hat and it cuts off the head of a marble statue. And I'm like, the brim of the hat is not thick enough. It's not wide enough to be able to cut through.
We all felt that way.
A lot of people are
explained this
mistaken.
differently.
You made a good point here.
It is not a blade inside the hat. It is just like a metal band, and what it does when he throws it, it breaks your neck.
It crushes.
It doesn't cut. It
doesn't
yeah.
cut. It
It's
just
the
breaks
weight.
it. Yes.
That
Absolutely.
makes a lot more sense.
Exactly.
The whole movie makes more sense.
Right.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, well, before we run out of time, there's a little special something I want to do. We usually do the rating of 5 stars, but I feel like I don't want to.
Oh,
wait, just wait.
Yeah.
Hear me out here.
Okay, totally pointless.
They're all 5-star.
Yeah.
Is pretty much all we're going to say.
They're
but
fantastic.
this is what I want to do. I want to put all of us on the spot. I want you to rate the first 3 that we watched
In
order of which one from 3 to 1.
Wow. Okay, Steven's gonna go last because I sort of
last.
almost
Okay.
feel
Respect
like
his opinion the most.
he's the professional.
We're
here.
just kind of goofing off here. He's the intellectual.
So in chronological order, we have Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger. I will argue that I'm gonna say I'm real weird in this sense. I love the first one. I'm gonna actually say my favorite is Dr. No, then Goldfinger, then Russia with Love.
I'm going to have to say that I think the one that I enjoyed the most was Goldfinger. That being said, I actually appreciate From Russia with Love the most. For me, it's From Russia with Love, then Goldfinger, then Dr. No.
All right. Well, I'm glad that we all had differing opinions on this.
That's interesting.
It could have been a gamble. It could have been kind of boring.
Yeah, it can be real boring. My favorite, and has always been my favorite, is Goldfinger. I just feel like this was the perfect Bond movie. They really got it right. They've really honed the skill. And then I'm going to go back to Dr. No. I believe that just out of the story itself, I think is the most interesting. And then From Russia with Love.
All right.
The professional opinion.
Yeah.
Now that
see which one of us
now
was
that I'm put on the
right.
spot. Well, I'm going to go back. Number 3, I'm going to have to say is Dr. No. It's my third.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not to say anything bad about it, but it's just, in my opinion, I don't like it as much as the other
They're
two.
still developing Bond.
Correct.
You know,
Yeah.
I think I love the adventure of actually coming up with all this stuff, which is why I think I love it so much. But you're right, they're still developing Bond.
Sure. My next choice, which a lot of people will probably disagree, I'd have to say second is Goldfinger. I know you can make a case that it's the best Bond movie ever, but I have to go with From Russia with Love because to me it is not only the quintessential Bond movie, but it's also a quintessential spy movie. I think more so than any
interesting,
other.
interesting. All right.
Whereas the other ones, it's more of a sci-fi aspect. This one, I feel like it's pure spy movie.
And isn't that what we love about Bond so purely?
Absolutely. Right. And so I guess that means that Chewy was right.
Count it.
Got it. Well, we're going to leave you with some more music from the James Bond theme. I hope you've enjoyed our very Bond episode of Flix List. I'd like to thank Steven for coming by
Yes,
and
thank you
being
very much.
an
Thank you,
excellent professional on the subject.
It's been a pleasure.
We should do this again.
We will have you back.
I would love to come back.
We'll do some more fun stuff. And until next time, I hope you have a pleasant day. And you're listening to WHYR LP 96.9 FM, Baton Rouge Community Radio.
Y'all are so weird.